Let me paint a picture for you. It is 2016. Donald Cowboy Cerrone is on fire. 8 straight wins, 6 performance bonuses. A fresh move to welterweight, and he is wrecking dudes left and right. People are talking about him like he is the scariest man in the UFC outside of the title picture. He's got a badass ranch, sponsorships rolling in, and a fan base that adores him because he will fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. Cowboy was the blue-collar superstar of MMA, the guy who never turned down a fight, never played it safe, and always delivered absolute bangers inside the Octagon. It was a walking action movie. The head kicks, the wild submissions, the knockouts that made the crowd lose their minds. Fast forward just 5 years, and it's like watching a legend fall in slow motion. 6 straight losses, no wins in over 3 years, a 40-second obliteration at the hands of Conor McGregor, and finally, Dana White, the man who lets legends fight way past their prime, publicly saying, it might be time for Cowboy to hang it up. So what the hell happened? How does a man go from being one of the most beloved UFC fighters ever to leaving his gloves in the Octagon with his head down? What was the price of fighting with zero hesitation and zero fear for over a decade? This is the full story of Donald Cowboy Cerrone, his rise, his peak, his brutal decline, and why the most fearless fighter in UFC history had to ride off into the sunset for good. So buckle up. Every great cowboy has an origin story, and Cerrone's starts in the rough streets of Denver, Colorado. A kid who never fit in, got into fights daily, and had one of the wildest upbringings you could imagine. Donald wasn't some natural-born athlete who got into training early on in his life. No, this dude was getting into street fights before he ever put on a pair of gloves. He was diagnosed with ADHD at a young age, which basically meant he was a hyperactive ball of chaos. His parents didn't really know how to handle him, and he was constantly getting into trouble at school. Fighting wasn't just something that Cowboy wanted to do, it was something he had to do, because from the moment he could remember, he was either throwing hands or getting picked on. And then came his grandfather, the man who would change his life forever. He was a no-nonsense, old-school badass. We're talking about a guy who had zero tolerance for weakness and believed that if you had a problem, you handled it like a man.
Like I said, there's not one building on here that we haven't built ourselves. We've built everything by hand, exactly how we want it, you know? These guys think I'm crazy because I don't ever draw plans. I just have it all up here and we just start building and they're like, oh, that's how that's gonna lay, that's how that works, okay. And just teaching them the electrical and the framing and insulation and roofing. So I worked many jobs, you know, and then I'd get fired or my boss would say something and I'd like, who the f are you talking to like that? And then I'd get fired, right? So I know how to do a lot of stuff, but I'm excited to teach my son all these life skills, you know, not only these guys, but I've got an ice bath, a hot tub, and then a pretty cool sauna. I'll show you guys. Actually, really, this is like probably most thing I'm proud of is our sauna.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you've like built anything that you're like, I screwed that up and you don't like it.
Cowboy's parents weren't really around, so his grandfather basically raised him. But there was no soft parenting here. If Cerrone got in trouble at school, he got a whooping. If he lost a fight, his grandpa told him, well, you better go fight that kid again. This wasn't the kind of childhood that most people have, but for Cerrone, it shaped him into the fighter that he would become. It taught him that pain didn't matter, that quitting wasn't an option, that if you got knocked down, you didn't just get back up, you came back swinging harder. And that mindset was going to carry him through some of the most brutal wars in MMA history. Before Cerrone ever stepped into a cage, he was doing something that was arguably even crazier than MMA: bull riding. Yep, you heard that right. Most fighters come from wrestling, boxing, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Cowboy came from a sport where you literally try to hold on to a 1,000-pound beast while it tries to launch you into orbit. And if you think about it, that explains a lot about Cerrone's fighting style. The man was used to danger. He was used to taking risks. He was used to getting wrecked, dusting himself off, and doing it all over again. And on top of that, he is an adrenaline junkie. When he wasn't fighting or riding bulls, he was doing wakeboarding, skydiving, snowboarding, basically anything that could kill you. This was a guy who wasn't just fighting for money, he was fighting for the rush. Now, the crazy thing is, Cowboy didn't even start training in MMA seriously until his early 20s. He wasn't some prodigy who had been wrestling since he was 5. He wasn't a Golden Gloves boxer. He was just a tough dude who could scrap. And when he finally started training at a kickboxing gym in Colorado, something clicked. This was what he was born to do. Cerrone started competing in kickboxing and quickly racked up an undefeated record. He had the power, the speed, and the aggression, but he realized that if he wanted to make real money, he needed to switch to MMA. So he started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling, and within a few years, he was an undefeated prospect with a nasty submission game. And that's the part that surprises a lot of people. We all remember Cowboy for his striking, but early in his career, his submissions were just as deadly as his kicks. By 2006, he was all in on MMA, and it didn't take long for people to realize that this guy wasn't just another brawler, he was a born finisher. This is where the nickname Cowboy comes into play. Most fighters get their nicknames from their coaches, their friends, or some random gym story. Cerrone straight up gave himself the name. Why? Because he was a real cowboy. He wore the hat, he rode horses, he owned a ranch, he lived by the code of the West. So when he showed up to his early fights, promoters just started calling him Cowboy Cerrone, and it stuck.
They're calling him Cowboy?
Oh gosh, he was little.
How little?
I don't know, pretty little. We called you Cowboy on, well, as far as I can remember, we called you Cowboy when you were little. Cowboy.
How come? Why'd you call him Cowboy?
I don't know, you just... But I'll tell you, my favorite people in the whole world are cowboys. Oh, do you know what my favorite sport in the whole world is?
Cowboys.
The PBR.
And honestly, it was perfect, because Cerrone was a gunslinger, a wild card, a guy who would take any fight. And in the coming years, that reputation was going to turn him into one of the biggest fan favorites in UFC history. Before Cowboy was headlining UFC events and throwing head kicks for a living, he was wrecking dudes in the WEC. Now, if you're an old school MMA fan, you know exactly what that means. The WEC was not some low-tier feeder league. It was a Shark Tank full of killers, guys like Uriah Faber, Jose Aldo, Benson Henderson, and Anthony Pettis. And Cowboy fit right in. When he debuted in the WEC in 2007, it was clear right away that this dude was something special. He was scrappy, he was technical, and most importantly, he was a finisher. His first 3 fights in the promotion all ended by submission. He had this sneaky good ground game that people weren't ready for. The dude was catching guys in triangles, rear naked chokes, arm bars, you name it. But he wasn't just some jiu-jitsu guy. He had that aggressive Muay Thai style, sharp elbows, nasty knees, and the kind of kicking game that could shut your lights off in a second. By 2009, Cerrone had already fought for the WEC lightweight title twice. His wars with Benson Henderson were absolute barn burners, especially their first fight, which was an instant classic and one of the best fights in WEC history. So when the UFC bought the WEC in 2010 and merged the rosters, it wasn't even a question. Cowboy was heading to the big leagues. Cerrone's UFC debut came in 2011, and from the jump, he did what he always did, fight like a madman. He racked up multiple wins in his first year, including highlight reel finishes and post-fight bonuses. His fan-friendly style, aggressive striking, brutal kicks, and an underrated submission game made him an instant favorite. But what really set Cowboy apart is that he didn't fight to win on points. He fought to finish. He wanted knockouts, submissions, and wars that left both guys bloody and exhausted. And he didn't cherry-pick opponents. He took fights on short notice, fought dangerous up-and-comers, and threw down with anyone. In a sport where fighters often play it safe to climb the rankings, Cerrone was a throwback to a different era, one where warriors fought for the love of the game. With his UFC earnings, Cowboy built the BMF Ranch, a training ground for fighters who shared his mindset. It was less a gym and more of a fight club in the middle of nowhere, where fighters could live, train, and embrace the grind. By 2013, Cowboy Cerrone was one of the most active fighters in the UFC. He was never in a boring fight, and whether he won or lost, fans knew they were getting their money's worth. But between 2013 and 2016, something special happened. Cerrone went on a legendary run that cemented his status as one of the greatest active fighters in UFC history. From 2013 to 2015, Cerrone went on an absolute tear in the lightweight division. 8 straight wins, multiple knockouts, 6 performance bonuses. He wasn't just beating people, he was styling on them. Head kicks, submissions, brutal combinations. It didn't matter how tough his opponents were. Cowboy was running through them like a man possessed. He beat Edson Barbosa, Jim Miller, and Miles Jury, all in devastating fashion. But the fight that truly put him on the map was his rematch with Benson Henderson. Henderson had beaten Cerrone twice before, back in their WEC days. But in 2015, they met again in the UFC, and this time Cowboy got his revenge, winning a close decision. That was win number 7. One more victory and he would finally get his first UFC title shot. And who did he have to get through? None other than John Makdessi, a dangerous striker. But behind the scenes, Cerrone was battling something far more dangerous than any opponent: his own mind. Cowboy had always been open about his pre-fight anxiety, crippling self-doubt, panic attacks, even moments where he'd sit in the locker room before a fight convinced he was about to die. He described it as pure terror, a feeling that never went away, no matter how many times he stepped into the cage. And yet the moment the fight started, something switched. The fear, the self-doubt, it all disappeared, replaced by pure instinct and aggression. Against Makdessi, the moment came in the second round. He landed a perfect left head kick, breaking Makdessi's jaw and forcing him to quit. 8 straight wins, title shot secured. By the time Cowboy finally got his shot at the lightweight belt, he was on top of the world. Fans loved him, he was making good money, he had the BMF ranch, and he was about to fight for a world championship. But here's the thing about MMA. It doesn't care about fairy tales. Rafael dos Anjos was an absolute monster at the time. He had destroyed Anthony Pettis to win the belt and was looking like an unstoppable force. And when he stepped into the Octagon against Cerrone, he wasted no time proving it. In just 66 seconds, RDA crushed Cowboy with body shots and finished him with ground and pound. It wasn't just a loss, it was a beatdown. And just like that, Cerrone's 8-fight win streak was over. His title dreams were crushed. But instead of sitting out, regrouping, and making another run at the belt, he did what he always did. He took another fight, just a month later, at welterweight. Most fighters after losing a title fight take time off. Not Cowboy. Less than 2 months after getting knocked out by RDA, he was back in the cage, this time at 170 pounds, and somehow moving up in weight made him even more dangerous. He ran through Alex Oliveira, Patrick Cote, Rick Story, and Matt Brown, finishing all 4 of them. And in typical Cowboy fashion, these were highlight reel finishes. The head kick knockout of Matt Brown is still one of the coldest knockouts in UFC history. By the end of 2016, Cowboy was a legitimate welterweight contender. He had won 4 straight fights in his new division, all by stoppage. He was making bank, sponsorship deals were rolling in. The BMF ranch was thriving. But in classic Cowboy fashion, he never slowed down. He never cherry-picked opponents, he never took the safe route. Instead of pacing himself, he kept up his relentless schedule, fight after fight, war after war. And that kind of lifestyle eventually catches up to you. At first, it was subtle, a few more punches getting through, a bit slower on the draw, but then came the fight that made it undeniable. January 28, 2017, Cerrone versus Jorge Masvidal, 2 fan-favorite strikers going head-to-head. At first, Cowboy looked good. He was throwing his usual slick combos, landing big shots. He even had Masvidal backing up at times, working behind his signature kicks and fluid boxing. But by the end of the first round, Masvidal dropped him. Not once, but twice. The first knockdown came right before the bell, and Cowboy was clearly rocked. If there had been 10 more seconds on the clock, the fight might have ended right then and there. And when the second round started, it was clear that Cowboy hadn't fully recovered. Masvidal smelled blood and went in for the kill. He finished Cowboy with a brutal barrage of punches. It was Cerrone's first knockout loss in years. And it wasn't just a loss, it was a brutal statement. Masvidal had exposed a vulnerability that hadn't been so obvious before. Cowboy had always been hittable, but now he wasn't recovering the same way. And this is where things started to change. After the Masvidal fight, things got rocky. Cerrone lost to Robbie Lawler, Darren Till, and Leon Edwards. 3 absolute killers, but still, Cowboy wasn't looking the same. He was slower, he was getting hit more, his legendary toughness was still there, but the wars were catching up to him. Most fighters, when they start slowing down, adjust their game. They fight smarter, more defensively. But Cowboy kept fighting the same way. No head movement, no game plan, just pure brawling. And it was starting to cost him. By this point, Cowboy had been fighting professionally for over a decade. He had taken thousands of punches, absorbed insane amounts of damage, and fought through injuries that would have sidelined most guys. But the thing is, your body doesn't care how tough you are. It breaks down eventually. But Cowboy was still Cowboy. He was slower, less durable, and easier to hit. And in the fight game, that is a death sentence. January 18th, 2020. The biggest fight of Cowboy's career. The biggest payday. The biggest spotlight. Cowboy versus Conor McGregor. But the fight lasted only 40 seconds. McGregor exploded out of the gate, closing the distance like a man possessed. The first shot, a cannonball of a left hand, whizzed past Cerrone's head, but Conor didn't stop. He launched himself into the clinch, and in a move that no one saw coming, started battering Cowboy with bone-crushing shoulder strikes. The first cracked his nose, the second left him dazed. The third, that one shattered whatever confidence was left. Before Cerrone could reset, Conor uncorked a left high kick that landed flush on his jaw, snapping his head back like a car crash in slow motion. Cowboy staggered and McGregor swarmed, a blur of fists hammering down like a thunderstorm. Within seconds, the ref had seen enough. It was over. A massacre. 40 seconds, and Cowboy lay in the wreckage of Conor's comeback.
I haven't really talked to anybody about that fight or anything going in, but when he came at me and ran with that big shot and I shot in, man, his hip, I hit his hip bone. Like, that's what started the whole, and then I grabbed a hold of him just to like get my bearings back, and he like did the jumping shoulder slam, which just compounded the fog in my brain. And then I let go and he head kicked me. So it was just like, you know what I mean? There was no time to like regroup. So it was from the first second of the fight to when he ended it that I couldn't even get my bearings.
And after this, it was all downhill. From 2020 to 2022, Cerrone fought 6 more times. He didn't win a single fight. Each time, the same painful story played out. He would step into the cage, hoping for a spark, only to leave battered, bruised, and wondering if he still had it. Loss after loss, stoppage after stoppage. Dana White himself said he didn't want to see Cowboy take any more damage. But Cowboy kept fighting. He was running on empty, but he refused to quit. His body was breaking down. He wasn't recovering like he used to. His chin was gone. His power was fading. At UFC 276, Cowboy finally called it quits. After losing to Jim Miller, he left his gloves in the Octagon and walked away stating, "I don't love it anymore, guys. It's hard for me to get up, and I just don't love it anymore."
I don't love it anymore, Joe. It's hard for me to get up, and this is the longest camp I've had in a long time, and I'm not complaining to anybody, but I just don't love it anymore. I'm going to be a movie star, baby, so it's time to bow out. I gotta know when, this is the perfect event, man. Sold out crowd, Las Vegas, talking to you, got my boys. One hell of a career, man. Hopefully one day I'm in the Hall of Fame, and thank you.
It was emotional. The fans gave him a standing ovation. And just like that, the Cowboy era was over. Now, most fighters struggle badly with retirement. Some go broke, some can't let go of the fight life and end up taking regional fights for pennies. Some just disappear completely. But Cowboy did Cowboy things. Almost immediately after retirement, Cowboy made the transition to acting, and not in some small background role. The guy had a legitimate Hollywood career lined up before he even left the UFC. See, for years, Cowboy had been dabbling in movies doing stunt work and making connections in the film industry. He even trained with guys like Keanu Reeves for movies like John Wick 2. So when he retired, he went straight into full-time acting. He landed leading and supporting roles in movies like Terror on the Prairie, where he starred alongside Gina Carano in a gritty Western thriller, and The Commando, an action-packed crime drama featuring Mickey Rourke. He even joined the cast of the Roadhouse remake, sharing the screen with Jake Gyllenhaal and his old UFC colleague Conor McGregor, and one of the most high-profile MMA Hollywood crossovers in years. Even with acting taking off, Cowboy never left his roots. The BMF Ranch is still a massive part of his life. What started as a private training camp became something way bigger. Their ranch is now a full-blown training facility for up-and-coming fighters that also includes a shooting range, a motocross, and extreme sports hub. It is basically Cowboy's dream lifestyle. He gets to train when he wants, ride dirt bikes, shoot guns, and just be a cowboy every single day. Now let's take a second to step back and really look at Cowboy's career. There is a reason people love this guy. He never played it safe, he never turned down fights, he never worried about the perfect training camp or waiting for the best matchup. He fought anyone, anywhere, anytime. But the thing is, that mentality comes with a price. Cowboy fought more than anyone else in UFC history. 38 UFC fights, 23 wins, second most post-fight bonuses ever, most knockdowns in UFC history. But at what cost? Cowboy took a ridiculous amount of damage in his career. We are talking 1,869 significant strikes absorbed, and out of those, 1,070 were head strikes. That is over 1,000 clean shots to the skull. On average, he absorbed 4.27 significant strikes per minute, with 2.44 of them targeting his head. And when you add up all the time that he spent in the cage, 7 hours, 17 minutes, and 39 seconds of battle. That is over 7 hours of absorbing punishment from some of the best fighters in the world. And it raises the question, was it worth it? For Cowboy? Absolutely. But for young fighters coming up, his career is a lesson. Fighting every 2 to 3 months sounds cool until your chin is gone by 35. Saying yes to every fight makes you a fan favorite, but shortens your career. And being fearless gets you respect, but it also gets you KO'd by the next hungry contender. Cowboy lived and died by the sword. And while he never became UFC champion, his legacy is just as strong as some guys who did.